to talk about COVID. Does anybody, are we tired of talking about COVID? But I think this is interesting because it's COVID in the context of getting kids back outside and being a little specific around, I don't know, can we have transmission outside when we're outside in the garden? Is that a thing? So we're going to talk about that today. That's one of the things I want you to leave with today is really understanding, what is the difference between being inside and the risk of COVID and being outside and the risk of COVID? And then when you're outside with kids, what are some of the safety practices that would be a really good idea? Let's get going. Please ask questions as we go along. I really prefer you just kind of speak up, ask for clarity, open your mic, anything, pause, ask for a pause, anything you want. So here we go. My name is Nissa. Okay, I have a master's in public health. That's one reason I get kind of excited about talking about this kind of topic. And before we get started, you should know that public health means that I'm not so interested in I'm not a doctor, right? So I'm not interested in one person's cholesterol, like your cholesterol is high. What are we going to do about it? I'm interested in why, a whole population has high cholesterol and what do we do about that? So I think in groups of people, that's how I think. That said, I've worked in public health in New Mexico it's my 21st year. I've worked completely in schools and I've worked a lot individually with kids. So I have that side of me that has worked individually with kids. I ran mental health programs in Laguna and Acoma, and in the city here, the mental health programs were in the schools, and I've worked in school gardening for over 10 years. And then I also on the side teach forest school, which means I teach some kids myself out in the forest. So I've been doing that for 4 years. So I'm a teacher in that sense too. So I have the side that's like the big picture, and then I have the side of me that's like, yeah, I've worked with kids and I kind of know how they are. Okay, so here's the basics if you want to leave now. If you want to be safe, go outside because COVID is a completely different animal outside versus inside. We're going to learn about that.
Nissa, are you presenting a presentation?
Can you not see it?
We can't see it, no. So I think you have to share your screen.
How would I do that?
Do you see at the bottom, there should be a green share screen button?
No.
Do you see where it says participants and then chat, and then it should say share screen?
It says participants, invite, chat, closed caption, pause recording, stop recording, breakout rooms.
No share screen?
No, not there.
Is there 3 little buttons that you can click over?
Yeah, that's what it says when I go there.
Well, can you?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I had to make my screen big.
Okay.
See it now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. There you go, guys. Okay. So you heard my spiel about public health. This is a little because we've been talking throughout this conference about land acknowledgement, and I think also just sort of acknowledgement of who we are as people. So I want to acknowledge both of those things here in this slide. So if you look at there's me standing in fields of cotton. Is that my people? Half of my people, my mom's side, they're from a little tiny town across the border into Texas, right across the border from New Mexico, called Morton, Texas. And that's cotton country. And my people they were cotton pickers. They were not producers. They were not the big farm owners. They were pickers. So when they needed some extra money, they went out and picked in the cotton fields. One of the things I'd like to acknowledge there is that cotton is it's very hard on the soil. And then when business got big and in the 40s we got pesticides, cotton became one of the most sprayed crops in the world. So cotton can be really damaging to the earth. And so, I just think about cotton. I think about cotton a lot in the legacy of my family. And they didn't make those choices, but they were part of that cycle. And they were living on Apache land. This was previously Apache land. So I want to acknowledge that. But that big lady with those 2 kids, that's my great grandmother. And she could pick cotton, but she also was known as like that lady who grew all the vegetables in town. And that lady who fed everybody with vegetables out of her yard. And somehow she eked vegetables out of this really sort of, what you could look at and say, there wasn't much water. The soil had limited resources, and she eked out of there. And that's my grandmother standing in that white dress. And look what's behind her. I think it's really interesting, this picture. There's those little raised beds out there in that desert with a mule. And then the other lady, that big lady, kind of looking at you through those glasses, that's my husband's father's mother. That's his Italian nonna, and she came over here after World War I. And she always had a big garden. In Italian, we called it an orta. My husband grew up with her in the house, and she came from Italy to the United States to Albuquerque in 1980 in a yellow school bus. And so she came to Albuquerque, and she's actually buried here. She passed away here, and she's buried on land that was one time of the Sandia people. So just think about all these intertwinements in our own lives. And so these are some of the people, the ancestors that have come through my own life. So we're going to talk about COVID, and we're going to talk about being outside, and we're going to talk about health, and we're going to talk about transmission, blah, blah, blah. But I really want to ground this conversation in kids, because as adults, we're going to go back to school, and we're going to go into the garden, and we're going to think a lot about, we need this. We need you to wear masks, and we need you to wash your hands, and we need you to do X, Y, Z. But it's also really important to keep asking ourselves, what do children need? And the reason we need to do this is because it'll help us, even when we're asking them to wear masks or wear better fitting masks or keep their mask on, to think about how to talk to them about it. Because what children need from us right now is a lot of being with them, kind of leadership, but also really understanding what this is like for them. And so I like this picture because, okay, they're distanced, but they're also distanced in a way that children would like to be distanced, which is on their belly or up in a tree, or, children need to move their bodies in ways that adults don't even think about. So let's all through this just be thinking about, okay, let's get this work done of being safe from COVID, but let's do it in a way that we keep in mind what children's developmental needs are. And that's actually a big passion of mine, is children and their developmental needs. Because this is what children want, right? This is what children want. These are my this is my forest school class, and that's what we do in forest school. I usually teach about 8 to 10 kids, but this year I have a smaller group. And in that picture, they're in masks out in the middle of the river. So as your children, as you're re-entering the garden, I want to remind you to ground your work in checking in with the kids. Part of safety is emotional safety. And so I asked the kids when we went on a break when we were in red in our county, but when COVID was better, we went back to school recently. And I asked the kids on our very first day back, I said, okay, go choose 5 things or 4 things or a couple things around us here that represent what COVID's been like for you. And then they brought them back and they arranged them in their seat. And then we had these really rich conversations about what COVID's been like for them, represented by their objects. And this is one student's. And the pine cone is that it's been prickly. Sometimes at home, things get prickly. The stone is it's been heavy. The longer stick, it's been just really long. And I like the leaf, because what she said about the leaf is she held it up in the wind and she showed us how it fluttered. And she said, it changes all the time. Everything changes all the time. And so I've actually done this twice with them. I did it in the fall, and I did it recently. And it was really nice to have this conversation around what this is really like for them. So keep remembering to check in with your kids and as they come back. Okay, but let's talk about coming back. And this is Lindsay Marr. You're going to see me refer to her for quite a few times. If you're on Twitter, I highly suggest you just sort of, keep an eye on her posts. She's actually an engineer, but she studies how viruses move in space, in air, around rooms. She's really literally kept me sane through this whole thing because her posts are very grounded in like reality. Like she keeps amazing. I mean, she studies this stuff and she takes it very seriously. And she has continued to go to the gym throughout this whole thing. Very interestingly, she worked with her local gym to make sure they kept all the doors open. They did some CO2 monitoring, which I'm going to talk about. And she believes in kind of going along with life, but she also really studies how we stay safe. She studies masking actually a lot. And so she and some of the other scientists that I follow, they keep making this point, which is let's just not worry so much about being outside, and let's worry about the indoor spaces more. And this is Moog Sevic. I think that's how you say her name. I also really love following her on Twitter. She's in England, but she's an infectious disease doctor, also has a public health background. And she says that contact tracing studies suggest that transmission risk is 20 times higher in indoor settings compared with outdoor settings. It's not zero, but it's significantly lower. I'd like to say that with the new variants, we don't have very good data on, are the new variants changing this variable around transmission outside? But I follow her a lot, and so far she's saying it doesn't look like it does. And in fact, she sometimes gets kind of prickly and says, can we just stop worrying about being outside? As long as we have our mask on and some distance, it's so much safer. And one of the main reasons it's just so much safer being outside is that the risk of virus transmission is we breathe out, and then especially indoors, that breath builds up in an indoor space. Well, outside, you just don't have that. You just don't have that ability to kind of have it build up. And especially in a place like New Mexico, we have just this gift of the wind, especially in spring. And you immediately get this dilution effect. And so this is why, even if some COVID, even if it's one of these more risky variants, if it sneaks out of a mask, if you're outside, it's just like poof, and it's going all different directions, right? It's not just going one little place, it's just going, or going along with the wind. And so this is why being outside is really important. If you want, I've come up with a 4-page document, and I keep it current with all the current research about outdoor transmission. Every time I read a new study or see something new, I put it in this document. There's the link for it. At the end, I have a resources page, and I'll just make sure that that's available to all of you who come to the conference. But if you need to use this document with your principals or with any other colleagues to say, hey, look, outside is really safer, all of the facts about being outside being safer are in this document. Okay, so this is a little complicated maybe to look at, but here's what I want you to think about. COVID transmits in 3 ways. Drop spray, which is just a big fancy word, I guess, for like, gooey stuff. It's like snot, and like when you sneeze, the big stuff you can see, the big droplets, that's drop spray. Surface touch is just anything that's on the surface when that stuff comes out, and then it's on a surface. And then there's aerosol. And in this photo, the aerosol is that sort of, you can see the drops, they're the circles coming out of somebody's mouth. But the aerosol is kind of those plumes. And aerosol is where little tiny pieces of virus are in the tiny, 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 tiny droplets that we can't really see, that are in these plumes around us. And we really can't see them. And so those are the ones that are kind of more risky because, you can see the droplets coming at you, and their mask catches those if somebody sneezes, for example. But the plumes, they're kind of what would fill a room. And it's this aerosol that all of the scientists are saying, this is really how COVID transmits. And this is why it could build up in a room. And this is why outside it will dissipate. So this is just a picture to show you, like, if you look at the bottom pictures, the man has on a mask, a white mask, and the other one, he doesn't. But the window is open. And so we know that having a window open is very effective for indoor settings, or having a door open, because it just kind of sucks, just the way that the dynamics are, it kind of sucks things out and brings air in, and just that dilution effect happens. The top pictures are when windows are closed, and you can see it just kind of builds up in the room. So I would like you to think about, if you're a teacher or anybody who's with children inside, I would like you to think about this concept that, you know, any time spent inside, there's potential for virus, these aerosols to be building up in a room. And one of the most effective interventions for that is keeping your window open, keeping your door open. I read all these, you know, really these scientists who know all the gadgets, all the everything, and they say one of the most effective things you can do is put a fan in your door with the fan sucking the air out. They're like, it's like the cheapest, most effective thing you can do. But the other thing you can do, and all the scientists talk about this, is try not to stay in a room very long. So after 45 minutes or so, with children in a room, go outside and then open all the doors and windows and let that room air out. And so I'm hoping that we can work with administrations in schools and teachers to really get outside and make going outside a productive part of the day. So you need to be, if you need to do work outside, you're going to need settings that can accommodate doing that work. This happened yesterday. For those of us in public health, it was sort of like a huge sigh of relief. Let me explain this. Okay, so the CDC finally recognized that the risk of transmission by touching contaminated surfaces is very low. What this means is we're doing a lot of cleaning in classrooms. We're doing, you'll see on the news, like these big machines that come in and, spray bleach everywhere and stuff like that. And the scientists have been saying for a while, like, stop. The surfaces are not how we're getting COVID. The main way people are getting COVID is by these aerosols that linger in the air, and they linger for a very long time, and then you inhale it. It goes into your lungs. That is the main route. And then so Lindsay Marr says, now everyone should revert to regular cleaning, but don't over clean. Like, just don't go crazy on the cleaning and pay attention to the air. Shelley Miller, Lindsay Marr, Luis Jimenez, there's all these amazing scientists, and they've been saying this for a really long time, Joseph Allen. So this is kind of great. The CDC finally said, it doesn't mean we don't need to clean. It just means that, probably like clean a desk, cleaning hands is far more important than cleaning every little pencil that kids have touched. Having the children wash their hands before they eat is way more important than making sure that every pair of scissors in the room gets cleaned, or that every tool gets cleaned perfectly. So I just kind of want to put people at ease. So this is Joseph Allen from the Harvard School of Public Health. He has he heads an initiative called Healthy Buildings. I've relied on his website all through this. They have some excellent tools. So what they recommend is that this is what you should do for COVID. Stay home when sick, mask up, have an air cleaner in every room, refresh the indoor air, like, open the windows, open the doors, get indoor, get the air moving through the room, and go outside. Those are really good interventions. And so to reduce your risk. So it's interesting to notice that he doesn't say, put up plexiglass, clean every surface constantly, clean every pencil, and, use foggers in the room, sanitizing foggers. It's because if you focus more on keeping the air clean, that's a bigger bang for your buck than keeping a pencil clean or keeping a tool clean. So I just wanted you to know that paying attention to air is the most important thing you can do. And that's why going outside is going to be really great. Okay, then there's the new variants. This was in the New York Times this last weekend. B117, the first to come to widespread attention, is about 60% more contagious and 67% more deadly than the original form of the virus. Okay, so what does this mean for being outside together? The variant is no different from the original in how it spreads, so it's still those aerosols, but infected people seem to carry more of the virus for longer. And so what we're thinking is that these new variants, infected people, they're infectious longer, and they produce more of the infected particles into the room. That's what they're thinking is happening. What this means for being inside is go outside more often, pay attention to keeping that air clean. And what it means for outside is probably, just paying attention to how well that mask fits, and keeping space as much as you can. And again, masking is really important for that indoor environment, because if it's building up in the room for whatever reason, the fit of your mask is going to be really important as a backup to making sure that if the air is not completely clean, then your mask is really that backup. So if you have questions about the variants, we can talk about it, but it just looks like they're a little more intense for us to deal with, and they are coming. So, okay, so Dr. Allen from the Harvard School of Public Health said this recently: it's critically important that schools crack down on lax mask wearing and hand sanitizing and re-examine ventilation or filtration of classroom air. With the new variant, luck may run out for schools who have not had rigorous protocols in place, but have seen few cases. So they're basically saying, like, you know, let's be serious. He's a huge proponent of just go outside. So we're going to get to the outside environment, but I also want you to understand another advocacy tool that you can have as a teacher or a person who works with young people is that a CO2 monitor is a really great thing to have in your classroom, or anytime you're with, or you're in your office or in a conference room or anything. It basically measures it's a proxy for exhaled air. And if it gets above 800, then 1% of the air is rebreathed air. It's somebody else's air, basically. And the higher you go above 800, the more it's like 2%, 3%. And so you put these monitors in the room, and if it starts to get towards 700 and creeping towards 800, you know, hey, the air is getting kind of stale in here. We're rebreathing each other's air. Great. Intervene. Take a break. Go outside. Reduce the number of people in the room. Open a door or window. Put a fan in the door. It just allows you to know what to do. And in Japan and even in Europe now, they're starting to use these in like in when you reopen a large venue, like say you go to a play or a concert, they have these giant monitors up, and it checks the CO2 of the whole room. As the number's going up, they'll do an intermission. And Dr. Lindsay Marr says this is a really neat, effective intervention. They're using it in the exercise gym that she goes to, and they've had no cases. Okay, this is another effective tool you could have in the classroom if you want, but you know, you just tape that fan to those filters and it draws it in. No need to buy something fancy these days. But let's get outside. Let's think about how we go outside. And I'd just like you to think that when you get outside, try to have an environment that's more like the ones that has the open sides than a closed side, because the more we can have these open-sided environments, the less we're trapping any of those aerosols around us. So just try to have openness in any environment we even go to outside. Jose Jimenez, he's a expert in all this stuff up at CU Boulder. He says, you know, don't even take a bunch of kids and sit them between like two tight buildings. He's like, because if we monitor it, you know, things build up there too. Try to allow for open air. Don't be paranoid, but be aware. That's what they're saying. Be aware that this open air and the wind going through is really the best. Okay. The way that this might translate in the garden is it's much better to have a tool shed that's kind of small than a giant shed where children are like, you don't want to allow 5 or 6 kids hanging out in a big shed that they're going into altogether, because any small environment like a shed, or this picture with the plants is the greenhouse at Albuquerque Academy, any environment where people are inside is a room, basically. So you need to think about how young people move through a shed or a greenhouse, how long they stay in. And it would be better just to have sheds they don't go into, or just take the tools outside and just kind of for now say, hey, we're not going to hang out in the shed much, or we're not going to spend much time in the greenhouse. Okay, but what's so great about New Mexico is I just want you to think of your environment here as a resource, and go down to that bullet in red, which is high heat. And I just get so excited and geeked out on this. But this is a study that shows in order to kill COVID-19 heat virus containing objects, okay, like So for example, they're talking about a contaminated object, so a tool. 3 minutes, COVID will be killed in 3 minutes at temperatures above 75 degrees, 5 minutes for temperatures above 65, and 20 minutes for temperatures above 60. Okay, this means you have a contaminated tool and it needs to be at 75 degrees for 3 minutes and COVID dies. That's like New Mexico. I mean, we're above 75 degrees a lot of the summer or a lot of the year. So, you know, we can put a tool out in the sun here and easily be above 75 degrees. So I want you to think about the heat here as a real resource. I'm not saying don't sanitize tools, but what I do think is a good practice is line your tools up against a hot wall while kids are, you know, outside or in between classes or after class. Just leave them out there in the heat. And I don't think if they're out in the heat for all afternoon after you've had a gardening class, I don't think you have to worry terribly about the sanitizing. So, little caveat, the virus actually survives better in dry conditions, in low humidity than high humidity. But we don't have to go into that because the heat, we have a lot of heat here. So in winter, you have to be a little more careful here. We have we have low humidity and it's cold and the virus can live longer on things like tools, but we're going into the hot season. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about seating outside in the garden. But first I have to talk to you about how a public health person thinks. We think about this thing in public health called passive safety. And here's the example you always learn in public health school. For years and years and years and years, kids were overdosing on medications that they found in medicine cabinets. They didn't mean to, but little kids would find the medicine bottles and they would take those funny looking color pills. They'd be like, look, and they thought they were candy, you know, blue pills and red pills. And for years and years, we had very bad problems with overdoses in young children. Well, and we did these huge education campaigns. And we would tell parents, you know, hide the medications, put them up high, blah, blah, blah. Well, mistakes happen and children were still overdosing. And finally, the law was put into place that all pill bottles have to have those like locks on top. Guess what? The overdoses they just dropped dramatically. And it's just because in public health, we think anytime something can be kind of like a passive safety thing, like it's just there in front of you and you don't even have to think about where to put that bottle is just pretty safe. From young children, those work better than having to think, okay, I need to hide this bottle. And so anything we can do to just like makes people, they don't even realize they're doing something safer. It's just there. And how I want to apply this to seating is I really want you to think about when children leave the classroom and you take them outside, if the seating is already prepared to be distanced, then you don't have to lecture them. You don't have to bug them. There's no stress. So I would like you to look at your campus, look at the places you're with young people and just arrange all the seating around them to be ready. And so here's the ultimate ready. These kids have their little seats in a bucket. This is in Maine, I think. They take their seat with them when they go outside to learn, and then they just sit on it. And that's the ultimate, like, sort of passive intervention. You're not really going to have to lecture them much about, okay, so you might have to help them be a little further apart, but you're not going to have to say, okay, don't scoot up to that person on that bench. Benches are really hard for children because children tend to plop on a bench and then sit really close to each other. So even if you have benches around your campus, it'd be great if you could put something on the bench that makes it like a big rock in the middle or something so that they just kind of can't scoot up. And that's what I mean by passive. They just have to make a choice that keeps them a little bit further apart. For older kids, it can look like this. You know, here's a surface. But this is the ultimate, right? Like the seating is already placed. Those logs are already placed at appropriate distances. We're going to talk about distance here in a bit. But what I would say is those benches are inviting kids to kind of saddle up. And so I was recently in a garden and I just kind of along the benches put various heavy objects so that they were kind of just would allow for 2 kids to sit on the bench. I put a heavy objects in the middle. So here we have kids on logs. And what I like about this is, you know, we are in what many sort of mental health people are calling a real paradox right now, in that it's normal and healthy to want to be close to each other and look at each other and, you know, sit close on a bench. And yet now we need to be a little further apart. But I like the idea of putting young people in a circle, because you sort of still get that feeling of intimacy that we really are craving right now. So I want us to think about ways to be both distant and intimate, and sort of feeling part of something. So here's another setup. Okay, so you can see the issue here, right? It's a beautiful setting. They have the seating already set up, but that's exactly what children are going to do. In fact, I watched it at a school the other day. I was there in the office. And there's a bench in the office. And I was horrified. I was like, nah, you can't have a bench in the front office, because these kids came in they piled on the bench and they went like this. And you know, it was totally natural. And what I really struggle with that situation is that it's common for adults then to start kind of nagging kids, or using a very shaming voice to say, you need to have space, blah, blah, blah. But I think, why isn't it just set up so that they can be safe and not have to make that choice? It'd be better to have settings like this. And then here is a setting where they could be near, but they've obviously taken some care to explain to them and set them up like a little further. Okay, let's talk about distance. So here's what you need to do about distance. You need to get an umbrella. See that guy down there? You get an umbrella, and you need to get a big piece of plastic and just create yourself some distance. No, I'm kidding. So these are just kind of extreme ways to do distance. But although that guy with the giant platform around him, that's hardcore, man. But distance is probably getting confusing. And if you guys have any questions about distance, feel free to put them in the chat right now, because it has changed. It's recently changed from 6 feet to 3 feet. And so the reason it changed from 6 feet to 3 feet was that the CDC said that there was mounting evidence showing that there's a little difference in school transmission rates when students, they had some schools that did 3 feet and some schools that did 6 feet, and they didn't see any difference in the transmission rates in those schools. So they said, okay, since we didn't see any difference, it didn't seem to make a difference, let's go ahead and go to 3 feet. Now, as we come into the new variants, this may change, and some scientists are already saying, you know, we'll see. But since it is 3 feet right now, that is appropriate. I think outside that's particularly safe. Like seating could be, but I think if you can set it up or so, as Lindsay Marr says, 6 feet isn't some magic boundary beyond which there's zero risk. The farther away, the better. And so just set your kids up to be intimate, but a little further away. Because here's kind of the issue with kids developmentally, they just kind of saddle up to each other, especially if there's work to be done. And in gardens, we have lots of work to be done. This is at Roosevelt Middle School. And when we have work to be done, they're just gonna saddle up next to each other. So we also might want to think about the work and how to structure the work. These are not COVID times pictures, but those children on the line with them standing, they're spreading seeds in a meadow at Albuquerque Academy. But I couldn't help to look at the picture and think, yeah, I mean, that's a COVID safe task they're doing, just because the way seeds needed to be spread in that meadow. And then the other young man there at Roosevelt, I'm looking at how he's kneeling on a pad, and I'm thinking, yeah, you could just place the kneeling pads at a certain intervals and say, okay, let's plant, but you already have the kneeling pads there. And so you say, you know, you get on this one, you that one. And I think it works really well to have those kind of visual cues for kids, like seats that are already ready, kneeling pads that are already ready, you know, stations that are already set up in the garden where they, you know, you two go over there and pot, and you two go over there and plant, and you five go over there and rake. That's a practice that's always been effective in the garden, because it's not effective to have 20 kids working really close. It's always been effective in school gardens to kind of say, you know, put them in groups. But right now I would say it's pretty critical. So I think being prepared as you take them out to the garden and having some stations or areas already set up is really important. But both of these distances would be appropriate under the distancing rules right now. How I like to teach, I mean, there's so many different ways to teach kids about distance, but I like to kind of step back and teach them a little bit more of the theory. So Lindsay Marr always says, when you go outside, she said she imagines in her head that everybody around her is smoking, and she just picks her path to get the least exposure. Because if you think, it's kind of a gross image, but if you think, well, everybody around me smoking, then the wind would be taking those aerosols in a certain direction, and you might just want to, like, you know, move a little bit of a different direction. And so I like to teach children that, you know, the way we breathe out, it goes with the wind, and we want to try to stagger ourselves outside so we're all not in each other's plume. But I don't like to use the cigarette analogy with them. So you can talk about smoke bombs, you know, those things you get at 4th of July, those that just make smoke. They all know those. Or even incense. How would incense travel on the wind, or campfire smoke or something like that? In fact, with my forest school kids, we did on the first day that I had them in masks. And in school, we lit a campfire and we watched it and we talked about it, but it just helped us conceptualize this idea that breath moves like that too. Okay, I'm gonna try something, but I'm a technological. Can you guys see me? I'm gonna go try to play a video of oops, my toolbar is in the way. That's great. There we go. Okay, this is a video of, we're gonna talk a little bit about masking, and this is a video I would love for you to show students, because this is gonna help you answer, how does aerosol sneak out of a mask? Does it sneak out of a mask? How does cloth masking do? How does surgical masking do? Katia, you see this video?
I do.
Okay, you see this creepy green thing here?
See it. Yep.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna watch just a few minutes of different
Nissa, you might want to turn your video off.
masks and how the aerosol plumes escape the mask. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest if you turn your
Full
video
screen?
off, then you can, maybe it'll run a little faster.
Turn my video off.
If it's not too much to do
Stop
that.
video.
There you go.
Okay. So here's a surgical mask. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, it's working.
Here's a KN95, which a lot of teachers are wearing. Here's a well-fitting cloth, double cloth mask. So it's a 2-ply. Okay. So anybody have a thought on that? Did it change any of your perceptions about masking? So what I want you to really recognize is that, whoops, it's not about cloth masks are good or this, a lot of people say cloth masks aren't good enough. It really is about the fit. And so what we really need to focus on outside with young people, if we were doing outdoor programs, is setting a norm that masks fit well. And, I think that you can work with your various programs to decide if a surgical mask is acceptable or not. It does leak a lot, a surgical mask, particularly with young people, because they often don't fit their faces. But the adults are going to be wearing probably KN95s or good masks. And as Joseph Allen says, if a student has a 70% mask and a teacher wears a KF94, similar to KN95, the combined benefit is 98%. So we really need to work on masks that, that third point on the left with the girl with the bun, it says that fit snugly against the sides of your face and don't have any gaps. And then have a nose wire over the top. What I really want outdoor programs to focus on is not sloppy mask wearing. And when you receive your children back to any sort of outdoor program, just set that norm. Talk to them about it right up front. Do mask checks. Don't start with really sloppy practices, because what we don't know about these new variants, is how they could sneak by maybe sloppy surgical masks. And then it's more, young people do pretty well with COVID generally, but they can take it home to people who don't do very well. They can take it home to, younger siblings or siblings with asthma. So this culture we can set of quality mask wearing, there's lots of ways to make even a surgical mask fit better. But this woman, where you can see the front of her face, this sort of central picture here where she's tied it right on the sides and made the surgical mask pinch up more, that actually works really well for young people. It makes it fit a child's face a lot better, and all you do is tie a knot there. That's one of the best interventions. Another intervention that makes a surgical mask fit better is to bring the straps all the way to the back. So you can see two pictures have a way to bring it all the way to the back. Yeah, you can wear a stocking over your surgical mask. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe kids would think that's cool, but I don't know. It does make it fit really well. But in other words, we can just say, okay, we're going to make if you're giving out masks at your program, or you can say, let's make them fit well, and you can make this fun with young people. I'd like to really say that you could bring all these things and say, hey, let's try these different gadgets to make our masks fit better. That one little white thing, that's actually it's cut out of a milk bottle. We made those at home. It actually makes your mask just really tight to your face. Okay, so this is a lot of information on this page, but I think we just need to learn to talk about masking and not assume that young people get it, because they can be coming from homes where they hear that masks are dumb or stupid, or or whatever philosophy they're coming from at home, they're arriving to you, and you have to set the culture of where you are. And so I think you need to be vulnerable with them. You need to say, hey, sometimes I don't like wearing a mask very much. What does it feel like to you? Have those conversations about how mask wearing feels. Really let them talk about how it sucks, but be very clear that this is what's happening, and adopt a we approach. This is how we take care of each other, and thank them and appreciate them when they wear them well. I think that's a big deal right now. Setting that standard, and then really thanking young people for taking it seriously. For teenagers, I really want you to talk to them like, hey, this is something we have to do in life to follow certain rules. For example, if you go to drive a car, you can't do it however you want. You can't have two wheels on the street and two up on the sidewalk. You got to drive on the street. And so a mask is kind of like that. You can't have it below your nose and falling off. It's got to fit your face, because there's certain times in life we just have to kind of like do things the right way. And young kids, you can use the analogy of like brushing your teeth. You got to do it the right way. So, teach the science, have them watch the videos, have them talk about it, play with gadgets, play with different masks, have piles of masks and say, hey, if one doesn't fit well, let's choose another one. So because I'm a public health geek, one of the things we do in public health all the time is that we use all kinds of modalities to teach. Do posters around your school or in your garden. You can give a lecture about masks, but you can also hold a puppet show about masking, or you can do a play about masking. You can do PSAs. You can have the kids film mask PSAs, messages like, hey, wear your mask, do a rap, something like that. Do murals about what's going on with COVID. This is a big deal for young people. This is a huge interruption of their life, and we need to use every modality we can to address that this is real for them. Have a parade. You can see these are all local gardens. That one up there with the Lily's garden, what I wanted to just say was there's kind of like a mural type thing there. That's Lily, who was shot in that road rage incident, and that's a garden I've helped with that we did in memory of her, and her parents help with that garden. But you could have a different kind of poster up there on the wall or painting. You can do down there was a parade, and I thought, well, that would be a neat way to teach public health on a school campus. Do a parade around campus, playing instruments, and we wear our masks. Let's see, let's go to, there's a video that some young people here in town made. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just want to promote this idea that one of the most effective things we can do on school campuses or with young people is have them be the messengers. And so this was a local video made in Feed the Hood garden. I'm just going to move it ahead a little. And these are young people who worked on the script.
Nissa, can you turn the sound up on the video?
Is that a lot better or no?
Maybe just a little bit more.
That's all I can do. Okay, I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I think the point is that these young people went through the effort to make a video. We have the link. Kateri and I both have it, and it would be available to anybody who wants to show it in their garden. I'd also encourage you to make one for your school. In this particular one, they did a great job. It's really neat. The one thing that they did from a public health perspective that isn't really an accurate practice is that I noticed that the kids touch their masks constantly through the video. They're like pulling them up all the time. And so their masks really should be well-fitting and not falling down. But you could have your young people watch this video and say, okay, so what's one thing that maybe is not a great idea in here? And they could see why are their masks falling down so much, or does it not fit their face? And you could kind of critique it in a way that would be learning for your own young people you're working with.
I dropped that video in the chat, Nissa, so people can watch it.
Oh, thank you. I don't know why when I go back in, it's not going to where I was. That's really annoying. Okay, so any questions about masking or distance? Masking so simple in terms of just let's be so meticulous about it right now. Okay, disinfecting. Let's get out the foggers in the garden, and we'll just spray bleach everywhere. I'm kidding. I really think that at this point we can be fastidious about washing hands. especially before eating or after restroom use, or if masks were taken off for some reason, touch better to focus on than bleaching every little thing that everybody touches. And so it's amazing to think this is true, but Joseph Allen said in February that they really don't have a single documented case of COVID-19 from surfaces. And so I think we can't get blasé with the new variants, but we can be at least less. I would like you to spend less of your day or less of your time out in the garden in disinfecting and more time paying attention to masking and making sure that kids are giving each other enough space, not hanging out in greenhouses together, things like that. Oh, where's my hand washing setup? Oh, here it is. Okay, my slide got out of order. Here's some simple hand washing setups you could do outside. That one on the bicycle wheel, that's at Easton. Oh no, that's at Kirtland. And you just hooked a hose up to it. And then I like the one with the orange bucket because it has a little simple foot pump. In public health, we get really geeky about foot pumps because that means you don't have to touch anything. You can do your foot. So those are really great. Okay. So we're going to disinfect. We're going to wash hands, but we're not going to get any. We're not going to overstress about the disinfecting. I think for tools, at the end of the day, it'd be a good idea. It's a good job for young people to wash the handles of the tools. And if you can wash the handles of tools in between use reasonably, I think that's okay. But if they're passing things back and forth, then the most important thing is that they don't touch their face, and that they're not pulling on their mask, like sharing tools and then pulling on their mask, pulling your mask up all the time and touching their face. That's the problem. But the problem is really their mask isn't fitting. But if they're sharing tools back and forth, then you want to make sure that the hands get sanitized before they go, like eat a snack or go drink something. That said, if they're going to eat or they're going to drink, you need to make sure they're very far apart. I would say 10 feet or so. I think with the new variants, we need to be really careful about a bunch of maskless kids sitting outside eating at the same time. It'd be really neat to have the kids stagger when they have a snack, or be 3 of you over there having a snack, 3 of you over there, something like that, trying to really manage any maskless time very thoughtfully. So that's a time that you can really pay attention to what's going on in your garden. Anytime that you need to have like an after school snack or something, then really try to manage that very consciously. And also as an adult, keep an eye on it, that people don't, kids will just saddle up next to each other, take their masks off, have a snack. And that would be a good time to say, hey, we're gonna move apart during snacks. So now let's talk about kids are doing something that you think is probably not a good practice. So there's, they inadvertently sitting right next to each other on a bench or something, or they're weeding and they're exactly shoulder to shoulder, something like that. What I'd like to bring your attention to right now is you're going to have to do a lot of reminding, and it can feel like a lot of correcting. And this relationship between kids and adults, when we are reminding young people about practices that we need them to do right now, it can get really naggy. And hi, Mary. It's nice to see you. You've never nagged kids in your life. I know you've never nagged kids in your life. Not a once. You want to say anything about the teacher nag? No? Anyways, I've been known to nag, but when we get in the cycle of nagging with kids, it can get really negative, right? And it can get really unpleasant with each other. So I want to talk for a minute about how are we going to talk to kids about this. Okay, so when I work with young people, I really try to do this thing of being assertive without shaming. It's really hard. And I've worked with mentors, I've gone to workshops. Becky Bailey, who I love, She does a lot of teacher training. She teaches a lot about assertive voice with young people, because when we start to use shaming tones with young people, we communicate shame by our choice of words, by our eyes, by our tone of voice. And for adults, when we speak to young people, we tend to say things like, Johnny, I told you to stop touching your mask. You know, we just get that irritated, tight voice. And between young people and adults, there's a power differential, and it can really kind of quickly get out of control. And when young people feel shame, like if they're called out in front of a group of kids, especially if you call them out on something that they're embarrassed about, like teenagers are easily to get embarrassed, or they will have a shame experience inside of themselves that's biological. They can't help it. You know, being called out in front of people can really make you feel bad. You can feel disconnected. You can feel shut down. Some kids fight back. They get really like aggressive. But I think you should be looking for, if you're getting in a nagging cycle with kids, you need to look for the signs that they're kind of getting shamed, that they're losing eye contact with you, they're stepping back, they're freezing, they're deflating. I see that a lot in kids when adults speak to them in a way that makes kids feel bad. You'll see the kind of flower droop. And then I've worked with a ton of kids, because I've generally worked in pretty schools with kids who have had a lot of really challenging experiences in their life, and some of those kids become really like resistant or talk back or mock the teacher. But I do think that if any of these things start happening, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what's going wrong in our communication? And if it's happening around mask wearing or hand washing or safety practices, then we need to, as adults, really think about how are we talking to the young people around us. So I'm going to teach you one technique that I learned from Becky Bailey. She was here in town, and I went to a workshop with her in somebody's living room, and she said, okay, guys, I know that you guys use teacher voice sometimes, that little shaming voice. And she said, I'm going to teach you how to be assertive. And she says, here's how you be assertive. It's so simple. You say, instead of saying, line up at the door, I told you it's time to go to lunch. How many times do we have to ask you? Those kind of things we say. You say, in your head, you say, the sky is blue, the floor is brown, it's time to go to lunch, line up. The point she makes about being assertive is it should not have any other tone than just regular. When we're being assertive with young people, it's just a regular tone of voice. It's not nagging, it's not irritated, it's just normal. And the way you get yourself to use a normal voice is quietly in your head, name some things around you before you speak. I'm going to do it right now. My lamp, in my head, I'm going, my lamp is silver, my mouse is black. Johnny, your mask needs to be tightened. And I've used this so many times with young people, and it helps me so much. It's just calming my own self down to get to assertive voice, a very even tone before I give them a direction. So I'd like you to try it around these safety practices. Really try not to get in a nagging cycle with young people, and really try to find a voice from within yourself that's just clear. This is just what we have to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And my voice is going to tell you. An assertive voice tells people that things are important, and it's just how it's going to be done. Here's one other thing I want to with young people, but do you see that puppy? What's that puppy doing? It's going like this with its head. Well, and the moms, there's pictures a lot that show moms doing this with young children, but when we tilt our head to the right, there's a micro expression of compassion. So we're always looking at each other's faces. You know, we're always scanning each other's faces, and children are always scanning our faces, and they're looking to see, is this person compassionate towards me, or is this person aggressive towards me? Is this person mad at me? Do you remember that when you were in elementary school, just looking at your teacher like, is she mad at me? Is he mad at me? Are they upset? You know, children to know that we're just being an adult. We're not angry at them. We're not frustrated at them. We just have to tell them what to do. Your mask needs to fit well. Use that even tone of voice. put your head to the right because it's a sign of compassion. Putting your head to the right is a biological sign of compassion. And it shows genuine care. And the person who's looking at you actually has kind of a different brain experience than if you stick your head out and squint your eyes. This creates a different experience in the brain than putting your head to the side, keeping your eyes kind of open and smiling. That creates a lot of compassion in the other person, and it puts the other person at ease. So we can use our biology to really work with young people. So really be aware of what you're doing. Is your voice high and tight, or is your voice calm and steady? And try not to get young people defensive. They're having to learn a lot of things right now. And if we can be connecting with them and compassionate to them, regulating our own self, they'll respond better to us. So I would like you to think about putting your head to the side, using what we call prosodic voice, which is this sort of, calmer voice, and saying, hey guys, I know it's a bummer. This is no fun in lots of ways to wear a mask, but what we're gonna do here when we're together is wear a mask that fits super good. So every day we're gonna work on a mask, wearing our mask in a really, in a way that helps protect all of us. So we're gonna learn about that. So you just wanna really keep it neutral, because we know that our kids are coming back to us at schools and in school gardens. They've been through a lot. And some kids have already been through a lot in their life. And now they're having to deal with masks and all these rules. I know my own girl right now, the cleaning regime in her classroom right now is really intense. It's like, sanitizing every object and washing your hands constantly and being far apart. And it's pretty stressful for young people. So these are some other ideas I want to give you around emotional safety. When children are stressed, Bruce Perry talks a lot about this. Dr. Bruce Perry is an expert in children's trauma. He talks a lot about when the brain gets really stressed, one of the things that helps the most with stressed brains is rhythm. And so if you're noticing that your kids are stressed, you're outside, you have all these masks, they're agitated, you have to clean the tools. If you ever notice stress in the environment of your young people, try to incorporate anything you can in your experience of gardening where you're using rhythm. So maybe you guys all have like a tool dance you do with each other. Teenagers love this kind of stuff, like stamp the rakes 3 times and make a song out of it. Make a rap, clap your hands. Those teachers you see who do the handshakes on the way into class. That rhythm, when we do rhythm with each other in any way, drumming, we can make instruments out of coffee cans and do some sort of rhythm together when we start our gardening. Synchronized rhythm with other people calms the brain down. So I'd like you to put that in your toolbox for just getting your kids together out in the garden, getting them together outside, and finding some rhythmic way to create connection. It will lower the brain's stress and reactivity. Drumming is great. Humming is a great, especially young kids, if you can hum some sort of song, it actually activates the vagus nerve to calm down. Touching things, sensory experiences really calm the brain down. I had a slide here and it got out of order, but this is a young man who, Mary probably remembers this story, but he was at Roosevelt and he got to the point where he could not take a test unless he had a piece of rosemary on his math book, because rosemary calmed him down so much. And Whitney, who used to work with him, she said he'd do this. He'd pick up, when he would get stressed out doing his math, he'd pick up the rosemary and he'd go, okay, I'm okay now, and put the rosemary down. So we can also use the plants in our garden to help regulate and calm down young people right now. Any of these plants listed here are good things to have, to make teas out of, to have around you. They just have sort of very calming vibes. And if they need to, you know, teach them to go smell the lemon balm or go smell rosemary to calm down this stress response that we're going to be having as we come back together. I want to show you, I have one more thing I want to show you, and then we're gonna, this is my, you can see the recommended practices. This is just my summary of all of the things that I'm recommending to you, and we're going to end by going over that. But before we do, I want to show you one more video. You guys have any questions? Okay. You guys heard of Jerusalem? Anybody heard of this song called Jerusalem? Anybody? Oh no, that's another one. Oh, let me show you this one. Okay, Jerusalem. Okay, so I actually had a certificate in international health when I went to public health school. I got trained in international health because I thought I was going to go work in other countries, and it didn't. But a lot of my colleagues work all over the world, and in Africa right now, I have a good friend, Anya. This song Jerusalem is a huge hit, and there's a dance that goes with it. And if I was teaching gardening right now to young people, we would be coming back into the garden, and if I could get them to do it, I know teenagers are a little rough, I would have them dance Jerusalem, because we're dancing it in my house, and it's one of those dances you can do together. And this is Jerusalem. Let me turn off my video. But this is the kind of thing we could do together outside. It's very connecting and calming and helps with stress. Let's see if we can get it going. Hold on a minute. Can you hear it?
No.
You can't hear it at all?
No, we can't.
No?
Do you want me to try to play it, Nissa?
How would you do that?
I can just try to look it up real quick on YouTube.
Yeah, do this Jerusalem. Oh, you know, okay, if you look up on YouTube, Jerusalem dance, there can be 10,000 videos because everybody's doing it. But do this teachers back to school version.
Okay.
There's healthcare workers doing it. Everybody's doing it in Africa. But I think it would be really great to do with kids coming back to school.
Okay, can everyone see this?
There it is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Can you hear this?
Yeah. We'll just watch it for a minute or so. It's a little slow, Katir. Maybe you can turn off your.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana, ilondoloze zuhambe.
Okay. Thank you, Kateri.
I'll put that in the chat in case people want to watch the rest later.
And so when it's not pixelated and everything, it's really catchy and it's really fun. And I just feel like right now, if part of what we need to do health-wise is to help find the joy with each other. And we're going to have so many rules for them. But the thing that helps brains calm down and accept rules from adults is that we feel like we're having a good connection with each other. We feel happy. We feel at ease. And so let's think about receiving kids back into the garden with anything we can to give them that sense of joy and connection and relaxation. And keep in mind that the brain scientists who work with young people say that rhythm and music are a big part of that. So we don't often connect those things with gardening, but I'd like you to think about what you can do. Even playing music outside while you garden can be really important right now as a way to lower our stress. So I know that's kind of an unconventional way to think about safety, but I think it's really critical right now. And this is the summary of what I'm suggesting to you right now. So let's trust being outside and let's spend as much of our day out there as we can, or leaving the indoors at regular periods. So think about letting that classroom air out or any group room air out. Let's try to get our outdoor classrooms functional. We're gonna have a talk next week about school garden design. So what does it look like to have an outdoor classroom that's actually gonna work for you? And plan the environment they're gonna be in, get the seating and the tasks arranged in a way that passively helps them be safe and you don't have to nag them a lot. And do anything you can to keep this learning going about all these practices that we need to do. Really focus on high quality mask wearing, sterilize high touch areas and tools, sanitize hands frequently, leave the tools out while you're working, leave them in the sun and leave them out at the end of the day, and then really reduce eating and drinking, monitor ventilation, keep kids out of sheds and greenhouses, and then touch, smell, dance, taste, feel the dirt, stay connected, stay calm, and use this beautiful place of the garden as a resource for you. And so from a public health perspective, this is what I have to say about it. What do you guys, what's on your mind about COVID and safety right now? Anything? Is there anything that you think will be like a barrier in terms of keeping young people doing these practices? I know when I teach forest school at first, the masking was rough. Like kids would show up with masks that didn't fit. I had to call home. I had to talk to moms. I had to say, okay, next week, send a different mask. I need one that fits well. So I was just wondering if you're foreseeing anything that will be a struggle with the young people you interact with. No.
Donna Detweiler in the chat has written, has anyone tried drawing animal noses, mouths on surgical masks? Would that make them more appealing? I love that idea.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. I want to tell you a study I read. It was early on in the pandemic, and they were trying to get kids in a homeless shelter for young people to wear masks. And so they tried all these different approaches. It was a journal article, and they had the young people decorate the masks like that. Like they thought, well, that would, if they could personalize the mask, that would really do it. So they had these workshops, and the kids could decorate the masks in any way they wanted, rhinestones, animals, whatever. And it actually still didn't increase, for these kids, it didn't increase mask usage very much. They were still taking them off a lot and pulling them below their noses. For the teenagers in this study, what really worked was kind of getting masks with people on them that they admired, rock stars or sports stars. So I think it would be really interesting to work with the young people you're working with to see what makes them kind of have that excitement or that style element of masks. And for young kids, it might be decorating them. For older kids, it might be kind of an identity object. But it's definitely worth exploring with your young people. Maybe you have a mask wearing or mask making, maybe you sew masks. Maybe you have some surgical masks that you decorate.
Definitely. Mary Irwin put in the chat, I think the variety of messages that young people have been hearing about masks will make this very challenging. Good suggestions to be firm and consistent.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. You'd be great at this. But I actually think the firmness is key. It's very hard to backtrack on sloppy practices. Perhaps it's the sex educator in me. I did a long time. I worked with teenagers. Can't be sloppy and birth control. It's just like I taught that for so many years. And I feel like with masking, we also need to be really clear with people. We're not going to be sloppy, kids. We're just not going to do it. And they need to know from us right now what is expected. Because we're leading them through this, and what they can lead us through, what they can help us understand is how this feels, and what we can help them understand is what are some of the clear boundaries that we need from them, that we need to enforce right now. And masking is going to be really important. You know, it's interesting. I recently taught to some middle school students. They wanted to do a public service campaign in their school about, they wanted to make some videos for their school about mask wearing, right? The kids were coming back, and these kids wanted to make some videos about, this is how we're going to wear masks in our school. So I brought them online. We went online, and I showed them from all over the world masking videos from everywhere, from India, from Africa, from the United States, you know, pro-mask public health videos. So the United States one had all these like pop stars and superheroes and stuff like that. And I probably showed them about 10 different videos. And then it was so interesting to me that there was one video that the kids really liked. Of all the ones I showed them, they were completely clear that one of them worked for them. And I'd like to show you guys that video because I was so interested about their clarity. The superheroes didn't work so well for them. You know, I'm probably not going to be able to show it to you because my daughter's in violin lesson. She's online too. Bummer. I'm not going to be able to show it to you. I'm sorry, guys. But it's a really neat video. It's from Portland. And it's two Native American brothers talking to each other about how hard this has been. And it's a beautiful public service announcement. And instantly the kids loved it. And what they said was they liked how real it was. They liked that the brothers were talking about how it is lonely and it's hard. And they were being incredibly poignant and kind with each other in this video. And they just said that's the kind of public service announcements we need. That's the kind we want to make. Let's be real about this. So that's one thing you can do with your young people, is show them different ways that we're promoting masking and asking them which one resonates with them. And I was, as long as I work with young people, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised that they really wanted that emotionally intimate depiction of how hard this is. Whoops, that's nuns dancing. So, any other thoughts?
Yep, we got Mary in the chat.
Other than that, we can.
Mary wrote, the garden must be treated as a classroom outdoors. Teachers would never allow students to roam around and do whatever they feel like in the classrooms. So making clear expectations from the start is essential. I know as a teacher, the first week or so of school, every fall is about setting expectations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's not a place to just go outside and run wild and disrespect things and disrespect each other. That said, I know Mary was good at doing the stations where the kids had really designated areas to go do jobs around the garden. But Mary, if I remember correctly, one of the jobs was turning compost, which was kind of messy and dirty and kinesthetic, because we can be organized and respectful in a garden, but we also need to be developmentally appropriate, which is, you know, big body work and flipping things over and looking for worms and getting our hands in the dirt. And one time Natalie, who was a food court member, was working at East San Jose, and she called me and she said, I have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? And she said, well, we have all these raised beds full of dirt and we're getting ready to plant, but all the kids want to do is like get down in the dirt and like dig with their hands in these empty raised beds. And I said, okay, we'll do that for a while because clearly they need that. Don't let them get dysregulated and crazy and throw dirt at each other. Exactly what Mary's saying. It's a classroom. Don't be disrespectful. But if their need is to get in there and just dig and pull it out and look for worms and examine the bugs and use their bodies, well, let that work happen in a respectful, kind of contained, developmentally appropriate way. Would you say that's true, Mary? Yeah. But don't let them dysregulating right now, especially, is not a good idea. We don't want kids just kind of crazy. That's not going to help anybody right now, and that's not going to help us keep them focused on being safe. But taking all that energy and shoveling, or taking all that energy and digging, you know, a foot down and looking for bugs, that's good. Getting that energy out appropriately. Doing some sort of coordinated drum dance outside, that's good energy. So unless you guys have other thoughts, we can take a little bit of break, because at 5:10, right, we'd go back to group.
Yes, so we at 5:10 will go back to whole group and be able to share some of our learnings, as well as potentially win a prize for today. So I just want to say thank you so much, Nissa. I think you just really made this so accessible, and it was a really awesome presentation. I'm so glad we recorded it and so we can share it with people. Just so grateful for your energy and time. Thank you. You're awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
go lead them through this. Yes.
Yeah. All right, so
They
we
need
will
us.
see you all back. And Jessica said the same. Thank you, Nissa. This was so wonderful.
Enjoy the good work, everyone.
Awesome. See you all back at 5:10.
Thank you, everyone.